welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Jacob Dahlin, your host. And today we have George Dupont with Champion Mindset Academy on. And this is kind of the third in a mini series of kind of the mental strength, mental mindset focus for the summer here. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
All right, I'm going to give you 100% of the credit for initiating this, because I think that you commented on a post somewhere. It's weird. This thing, you wonder sometimes when you started this 2 years ago with the podcast. It was the goal was to educate and inform about. It started off about Swedish junior hockey and the system over there and players over there, and it's kind of grown a little bit more into more of junior hockey, but from a Swedish twist or Swedish point of view. And we're coming up on, I think, now we're right at 2 years. We've released over 100 episodes, but so I thought, so you had posted, so you never know if somebody's listening, and apparently somebody's listening and watching on YouTube. So, so I challenged you back, and I said, well, do you mind coming on? And you accepted. So thanks for doing that.
I did. No, and I'm excited. I think anytime you get a chance to talk about hockey, it's great.
That's right. Well, I mean, there's no important hockey going on right now. We're just in between the conference finals and now going into the finals.
Yes.
So we just recorded another episode recently, and I said the same thing about, man, I'm getting a little bit anxious about there won't be hockey on every night, which we've been fortunate to have.
Yes.
So let's start a little bit, because I want to go in a little bit about your background, but I really want to the main topic is really about, how do we take the mental aspects of the game in this period, and how do we address it from your perspective, and hopefully people can get something out of it. And then of course, if they want to contact you, we'll provide that information where you can help them as well. But let's start with the geographical component, because where are you at today?
So I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Ottawa, Canada, and my journeys brought me to Oklahoma, which I didn't really know where it was. And over the last couple of years, I've settled in Dallas. So a little bit of a unique position, because I live in Dallas. Everybody's supporting the Stars, and I'm from Canada, and Canada has been so long without a Stanley Cup that any Canadian team that could get to the finals, I'm rooting for. So kind of go Edmonton.
Yeah. But you were also in Florida, you told me.
I was in Florida. So I've traveled around quite a bit, and hockey's given me the luxury and privilege of seeing a lot of the different parts of the world. Some I've actually got to live and experience, and others, people say, well, hey, have you ever been to this city? And you say, yes, but I rode in on a bus, got off at the rink, got back on the bus, had dinner, and went home, right? So so you don't see as much as sometimes people think, but hockey's been great at getting me around the world.
Yeah. Well, let's get that straight on the record here. You're a hockey guy, and we want to talk about kind of the mindset and mental strength from your perspective. But give us a little bit of background where so what's your hockey background, and tout your own credibility a little bit, because it's pretty impressive.
Well, so I grew up in the Ottawa Valley area in Canada, in the Nepean Raiders organization. And, I had the luxury and privilege of playing with a lot of great players in Nepean. A number of them played in the NHL. The most notable would be Steve Yzerman, who, he arrived from BC at the age 9. And when he was 9, he was probably as good as the 12-year-olds in Nepean, right? He was that kind of special hockey player. But I had the luxury of playing with a number of guys surrounded by, great talent. And I think talent challenges talent and challenges you to be better. So I think as a result, everybody's game got elevated. And then I played in the local Central Hockey League there, and had the luxury at the end of the year of being the MVP of that league and setting some scoring records, which resulted in me getting an opportunity to go to the Philadelphia Flyers NHL training camp, which ultimately is the catalyst for my desire, or my passion for mindset and performance coaching, because it was that experience that kind of drove me down the path on reflection as I kind of got older and went on. I played Canadian university hockey. I captained the first Halifax or Nova Scotia team to win a national championship. And I was lucky enough that year to be the Canadian University Player of the Year. And then I went on to play some hockey in Europe, and that. But going back to my experience with Philadelphia, I showed up there. I just set some scoring records, was Junior Player of the Year. You'd think I'd be coming off, with a lot of confidence and bravado and feeling pretty certain about myself. But when I walked into, the arena in Philadelphia, and you start seeing some people you saw on TV for the last 8 years. So from the time of 10 to 18, 19, I've been watching some of these guys on TV, and I really kind of changed my own mindset and started to have some uncertainty, some doubts, some stress and anxiety. And when I got on the ice, I thought, well, I've got to change my game. I've got to turn around and, I don't know if I can score with these guys. I've got to turn around and show I can play some defense, play with a little bit more grit, and do some other stuff. And when I walked in at the end, when they were letting me go, Bobby Clark, who I'd watched and admired on TV for years, was sitting across the table from me. He said, "Well, how do you think it went?" And I said, "Well, I'm not, okay." And I said, "I thought I'd come in here and show you I can play a well-rounded game." He said, "That's your first mistake." He said, "We didn't bring you in here to show grit and fight and whatever. We brought you in to see if you can help the offense." And so I left, and a number of years later, that was the catalyst, because I'd never really up until that point struggled with a lot of self-doubt and fear and anxiety, and got away from my own game. And so I often thought, well, what if I didn't do that, right? And so my goal in mindset coaching is to eliminate the what ifs for other people as they go through those same experiences, right? Hey, you can't always determine the outcome, but you can determine what you do and how you react, right? And if you do that properly, then at least you're eliminating the what ifs.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, we become experts after the fact, and
Yes.
and then um yeah, it's inevitable that you look back and you have like, man, I wish I would have, or I wish I could have, but that's part of the journey too. I just pulled you up here on normally I have this already up, so while you were talking, I was pulling it up on League Prospects. So um I mean, so would you describe, so if we're just looking at it from a stats perspective, you got some that have got 300 PIMs and stuff in the and certainly I think that if we look at your role, it probably um changed a little bit, but you're a scorer, or you were a scorer at the time.
Really, everywhere I played, I was either the top scorer on the team, or one of the top scorers on the team. Actually, really from probably the age of bantam on, or midget on, I believe with every year, with the exception maybe one, I led my team in scoring.
Yeah.
And I did have a competitive edge in me that sometimes probably wasn't necessarily the most advantageous, but I also think it's what drove me to score goals, right? But I also, as you're probably looking and smiling a little bit, notice that I had some penalty minutes as
Well,
well.
yeah, that's what I was. So let's take this one, because you normally don't see both, right? Or not always, but let's take the last year. This must have been your last year of juniors, 86, 87, Pembroke, CJHL, which is now CCHL,
Yes. Yeah.
um, in there in the junior A. and 51 games, 178 points. Not too bad. 59 goals and 119 assists. So you guys must have had a power line, but also 152 PIMs. So
Yeah, and
you must
actually
have had
that
a ball of fun that year.
well, I was very, very competitive. I didn't, I didn't like losing battles and stuff. And I really feel like, I I picked the right moments. Now, my coaches might sometimes say, "Well, you know what? Like, maybe you would have been better off to not get into it." But um, there's a way you play. Some players play on that edge, right? Where that fine line. You walk the fine line. I believe I was kind of one of those guys, and I believe that I needed to have that mentality to produce offensively as well, right? Because it was that determination to win puck battles, some of the other things that complemented my game, and it doesn't work for everybody,
Yeah.
but it complemented my game and allowed me to be, maybe a little bit more effective on the offensive side. And I get the first thing people ask me when they look at when they go research or look at my stats and they see I had 178 points. And at that point, that was a good year in that junior league. It was a league record at the time. And, the next guy in the league, I think, was my line mate at 109. So there was a bit of a gap. So I had a good year. And that's the year after that I went to the Philadelphia camp.
Yep.
And you'd think again that you'd have that confidence going in, thinking, "Hey, I had such success here that you're going to bring some confidence and some swagger into that camp." And and I began to kind of doubt where I needed to fit or what I needed to do. And I changed the style of my game a little bit when I went to that camp, right? And I still tried to compete and still tried to be gritty and the whole bit, but the offensive side, I kind of concentrate on, hey, I'm not going to make mistakes. I'm not going to turn the puck over, and I'm going to be gritty I became a little bit more of a player of inaction rather than a player of action. And my whole mentality was before, hey, I'm always going to work to be a player of action, which is really what you want to do when you hit tryouts. And I know that that's kind of that season that's coming up, and that's one of the topics we were going to talk about.
Yeah, so let's flip a little bit too, because certainly you played for a pretty long time, and then your last season, I guess, so you ended up in New Mexico, and then you ended up getting into coaching. Looks like the last couple of years you were a player coach,
I was.
and then
So
but then also and then you spent a lot of years kind of on the outside of the player role, in the coaching role, and on the admin side of different.
I did.
And I know that I want to get to kind of that, what you and I talked a little bit offline about the years in juniors, and
Yeah.
then we can segue into kind of
Yeah.
the season of life that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, a funny story, because when I ended up in New Mexico, it was Gary Younger. I don't know if you remember Gary Younger. He had set the Ironman record in the NHL previously, but Gary coached in Tulsa when I was in Oklahoma City. And when he made the move from Tulsa to New Mexico, he offered me a position to be his player assistant coach. And but when Gary left the NHL, he was the first NHL player to go play hockey in Britain, and he played for Peterborough. And when I went to Peterborough, I was Gary Younger's replacement. And I didn't know Gary at the time, but I kind of followed in his footsteps, not knowingly, and was in Peterborough in the British hockey league. And I kind of replaced him. So, years later, the connection came, and Gary and I got to know each other quite well in New Mexico.
Nice, nice. So, all right. So, certainly, we could
Yeah.
talk for hours about your
Yeah.
credibility. And look, you're a hockey guy, and the other part is that you're from Canada and I'm from Sweden, and so that makes us qualified, right? But
Of course, two best hockey countries in the world, right?
well, and let's talk about that as a twist a little bit, because different mindsets, different background, different
Yeah.
mindsets, different experiences, and different perspectives. And here's the thing I want to, what we were talking about, since this podcast is about junior hockey and the season that we're in, we're recording this early June. So whether you are in Canada or the US, we have a lot of European listeners that are when they're looking at, in the Swedish system, uh, junior players right now have committed to a team and they're doing preseason practices, off ice
Yeah.
practices. They're probably not on ice. And then sometime in August, they will have with their team, they will be, the people that they are in off ice with now that has signed with the team is going to be the people that start the season, and most
Yeah.
likely will be the people that will end the season with.
Yeah.
And 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 those guys are coming over. So take the and the junior system is a little bit different in age, because they may have now finished up as a, so you take the '05 player that has now one more season of juniors in Sweden.
Yeah.
They have 2 more years of juniors in North America, but they have finished their educational side. So there's this pivotal time period. So take the 2005 birth year. They're 19 years old. They can stay in Sweden and play juniors for one more year.
Yeah.
And what a lot of the '05s are looking at is, okay, I've gotten these. I'm going to some showcases, and I'm thinking about going to US, because they're pretty much
Yeah.
locked out of Canada. Take the take the
Yeah.
CCHL. Um, you're not eligible to play typically, unless you have been in the Canada or the US for a number of years in prep school and so
Yeah.
on.
So yeah, they've made rules to the point where they're making transfers or bringing in people a little bit more difficult. So you have to concentrate on your local markets in most
Yeah.
leagues now. Yeah.
But now with the people, with the leagues that are leaving Hockey Canada, started with BCHL last year. So now BCHL
Yeah.
players, they can have Euros in there. And now
Yeah.
there's I think it was the VIJHL, which is going to be kind of a feeder for the BCHL, and
Yeah.
BC are
Yeah.
opening up. And there's rumors that the Gouge in Ontario will be going to allow imports. And I get emails all the time about, I hear rumors and la da da.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
likely for this fall season, nothing's going to change. There's not going to be Euros in Canada other than those two leagues. However, in US, you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and they're all allowing imports. So there's a lot of opportunity. But here's the big difference, and this is what I want to talk about with mental mindset. The big difference in Sweden is that you're on the team. You're on the
Yeah.
team. You're not sweating it. You may be sweating, hey, can I now perform
Yeah.
when I get there, and the evaluations and making an impact. But if you're coming over and you're trying to make an all team, or you're trying to make the BCHL or the USHL, you may be highly recruited, or you're being, we want you over here. But we just recorded an episode where we talked about going to the main camp,
Yeah.
and there's 200 kids that are over there
Yeah.
versus what they're used to, 25. And
Well, and you're in a new place, and you don't know anybody, so there's also all these other added stresses too, right?
yep. And and so they've been preparing their bodies. They've been shooting a lot of pucks. They've been working hard in the gym, and they're coming in here. And so how important, since you've been there on the junior side, so let's talk. Let's go back there, and so we can have some context too. When you were
Yeah.
in Milton, which was, so I'm not familiar with OPJH.
So it's the Ontario Provincial Junior Hockey League, right? So it's basically the OJ or OJHL now.
Okay.
Um, same league. So it's tier two hockey in Canada, right?
Yes.
And these are kids that are aspiring. Most of them are aspiring to go to NCAA. Yeah, occasionally we had kids that were aspiring to make the next step into the OHL, right? They just got drafted. They were young. They were, at 17, they were trying to play in the OHL, but that's kind of that level of hockey there.
Yep. But so you've coached at that level, and these kids, and they're 17 to 20-year-olds, and they're coming
Yeah.
in a little bit different in Canada because they tend to, even today when you're doing these kind of ID camps, prospect camps, or main camps and training camps in Canada, they don't have 200 kids there. It's small.
Although camps are getting bigger because it's a bit of a revenue generator for the teams as well, right? So depending on what camp you end up at or what stage you end up at, so they all have these ID camps now that are like 8 teams,
Yep.
and they're walking around, they're trying to watch 160 players on the ice at the same time, and then they have their what's called training camp or their camp right before the start of the season where they make their final cuts, which is usually about 40 kids, right?
Yep.
And then they kind of whittle down from there.
But in Canada, typically they're giving out the letters of the LOIs, the letters of intent, and they're
Yes,
signing
yes,
players earlier
they are the key
than in the
players. So the
US.
majority, yeah, the majority of your roster is committed to, right? And sometimes they, but on the other side, depending on the team, sometimes they commit to more than the actual roster size, right? And that's to kind of lock players down. So you have to be aware of where you fit in the process, and you have to be a good communicator with the coach, and you also have to do your research and feel comfortable and confident that this is the right spot for you.
Yeah. But let's say you're coming in here now, or you're going for a USHL camp, or you're going to a NOL camp, or you're going to BCHL, and where there's high level of competition,
Yeah,
and to be able to play at that level. Here's the thing about, so there's a lot of these kids that are coming in, and there's some that they have their self view is that they
yeah.
think themselves better than they actually are. What's your thoughts on that self-reflection of, you're going to view them perhaps as a head coach or player or director of personnel. What you see is sometimes different than what they see in their mind.
Yes. So, and really, I believe there's two types of players, right? The ones that overvalue, their abilities or their talent or what they do for the certain or the current circumstance they're in. Like you were able to do one thing at one level and now you're advancing. And you have to be realistic and understand what you need to do to be successful at that level. And there's some that overvalue, but then there's also those that undervalue, right? Who get into situations and they start to lack confidence or have suffer from self-doubt or stress and anxiety gets in the way and affects performance, right? And there's certain things that you need to do to be able to turn around and minimize that. And the first one is self-awareness and understanding, right? And a lot of players, because self-awareness and understanding can breed confidence as well, right? No matter where you are on that spectrum from a 1 to 10, because once you have self-awareness and understanding, now you can apply certain things and set certain goals that are realistic, but you can accomplish, that give you a bit of an edge in what it is that you're trying to do. Um,
So
and as a coach,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, how does a player, because now we're talking about 17, 18, 19-year-old players here that may not have, and put yourself in, since you've been there, like you were talking about going to the camp in with the Flyers. How does a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, what were some methods to be able to do that, to get awareness?
Um, well, it's tough to do it on your own, right? That's why you have people like myself, right? It's tough to do it on your own because you're not really certain of the questions that you should be asking yourself, right? Or the thoughts that you should be having, right? Because every event, there's the ability to respond to the event. Now you don't control the outcome, but you do you do control how you respond to certain events, right? So I walk in a door, I don't know anybody. How do I respond? And that's where, really, asking yourself certain questions. So understanding what questions you need to ask yourself, which you can do some research and look around if you take initiative, if you're that person. Most 17-year-olds aren't, right? They're kind of, hey, I go out and again, they either are real confident and they don't need anybody's help because they got it all figured out, or they have some self-doubt and they're too shy or whatever to ask anybody, right? Because they're afraid of the answer. But that's where you kind of seek out guidance and learn to not be afraid of the answer that you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got to be prepared to hear whatever it is somebody's going to give you, and then look at that as a learning opportunity rather than criticism or whatever it is, right? So I'm going to ask you a question, and I could hear praise, I could hear criticism, but what I've really got to be is ready for whatever it is you're going to tell me, and then take that and go, okay, take that information, go, how do I learn from that? And as a 17-year-old kid, that's pretty tough to do on your own, right? So most of them, you got to seek help or surround yourself with good people that are going to be able to do that for you, right? Previous coach, you ask questions. Hey, coach, I'm now going to the next level. What is it that I need to do? And somebody you trust, right? Because that trust relationship is important, right? So previous coach, a parent, sometimes even a good friend, right? Hey, you know what? I want you to be honest with me, right? Here's what I'm doing. What do you think, right? And then be prepared for that information, and then work with that information the best you can to control the things that you can control.
So what are the issues that you see, or the common issues? Because I'm sure that through the years you've seen problems with that, right? And is there a big problem that they don't they lack self-awareness and they don't have that methodology, or is it that they're the people that they surround themselves that they're trying to get this self-awareness from are the wrong people?
Well, I think it's a combination, right? So a lot of parents are um either hard on their kid, or the parents are the same thing. They're really either really hard and critical because they're always demanding more, or they're too lenient and always praising and don't give the proper feedback. And it's a tough thing for a parent, right? Because you look at your kid and you're like, there's that fine line of, okay, what kind of advice am I going to give him? I want him to be happy, I want him to enjoy, I don't want to ruin his confidence. So there's that fine line that you always walk. And the most important thing again is back to surrounding yourself in self-awareness. And if I'm looking at kids that walk into a camp, and of course you have the ones that naturally have a little bit of that in them, right? And then you have that's the top 10%, 15%, then you got everybody else, right? And you have a lot of people that are more gifted, more skilled, more talented, who don't succeed based on their mindset walking in, right? It's the same experience that I had in the Philadelphia Flyers camp, where I began to doubt what I did. I lacked awareness of what it was or why I was there. Every time you're invited to a camp, a coach has an idea. I'm inviting you to a camp, or I'm saying you come to my camp because this is what I think you can do for my team, right? And then they're going to judge your character and they're going to judge your performance. And if you lack a little bit of that self-awareness, I mean, you're going to change your style. You're going to try and do too much. You're going to back off and not try and make mistakes. You're going to lose some of that initiative, uh, and or you walk around and don't interact well with the people around you. Those are some key indicators to coaches that those are problems, right? And a 17-year-old needs to have somebody around that they can trust to figure some of that stuff out, right? And ask themselves the questions. Okay, what is it that I do well? Why am I passionate about hockey? Why do I want to play hockey? And once you start to develop those things and start to understand it, then you can start to process. And the process is really the most important thing, because you control everything that's in your process. You don't control the outcome, because the outcome is influenced by the other players around you and the coaches and everything else, but you control the process. You control, okay, what's my meal going to be at night? What time am I going to bed? Am I going to be rested? Do I know what I have to do in the morning when I get to the rink, right? Do I know where I report? Do I all these things that you can control, and the more information you have, the better you're going to be when it comes time to step on the ice, right?
Yeah.
Process and routine creates comfort, and comfort creates confidence. And you need to also understand things and have that self-awareness, right? And most kids won't ask the question. Most kids won't ask the question, what do I need to do to improve, right? Or what do I need to do to get better? And most kids aren't necessarily ready for the response. So they need encouragement, right? And by listening even to a podcast like this, hopefully it enlightens someone, whether it's a parent, a child, or a coach, where it's a parent, child, or a coach, and have them turn around and this podcast enlightens them to the point where they're going to ask somebody,
Yeah.
hey, that's something that I need to do. And now they get it and take the initiative.
So what we're talking about here is really kind of, there's a delta between where they are and where they could be. So what we're talking about here
Yes.
is like
Yeah.
optimizing their potential.
Yes.
How big? So if we were to quantify, and with your experience, and I'm not saying like to quantify it exactly, but how big is the impact, or how big is the delta, the difference between where they are and where they could be from a mental, you can optimize your performance because you can work out really
Yeah.
hard. You can get better sleep.
Yes.
You can fuel your body. You can
Yeah.
you can really work on your shot. You can work on power skating and all these things. But the
Yeah.
mental side of it, if we silo the mental side of it, how big of a delta, how would you describe that delta?
Really, you're looking at about an 80% change, right? So, and it's huge, right? So when you go to a rink and you watch 5 to 7 year olds play, there's always the one kid that grabs the puck and skates through everybody, right? He skates faster. He's developed a little bit quicker. He's stronger. He's more physically ready. That gap continues to marginalize all the way through, right? And as you go, there's a pyramid, and you're eliminating certain people. So the physical gap and the talent gap becomes narrower and narrower as you move through different levels, right? As I go from 14-year-old hockey to 15-year-old hockey, the people around me are starting to now mature. They're gaining muscle, they're gaining strength, they've worked on their skills. If you go watch kids play hockey, just in one scrimmage, just from a skill standpoint, as they get older, that gap becomes close, like closer and closer. When I played professional hockey, I played in the Central Hockey League. I skated every summer with NHL guys, and if you were upstairs watching, you wouldn't necessarily be able to take everybody who was on the ice and say, that's the NHL guy, that's the Central Hockey League guy, that's the East Coast Hockey League guy, that's the American Hockey League guy. You wouldn't have been able to do it. The gap then becomes mental. Your most talented players in any level, once you get into pro, college, junior hockey, it's not that they're so much physically better than everybody else, right? If you took them out and did a run test and you did push-ups they're not the guys at the top of the list, right? So what separates them?
Yep.
Right. So what separates them is their ability to be resilient, their ability to remain focused, their ability to learn from mistakes, their ability to play with confidence and all these things that you say, well, hey, that's an intangible because they're not measurable. But that's the difference, right? And the difference between levels is, how do you handle making a mistake? Does it do you kind of fold and get more conservative, or do you become more passionate, more aggressive, and work on trying to become more successful?
So as a coach, so take your junior coach, and also
Yeah.
now as your mentor coach, um, how much of what you just talked about is observable?
Yeah.
So when you were coaching juniors and you're evaluating this group of 50 players, you could see the skating, you can see and you can see their bodies, and they're all very similar, like, and they're all,
Yeah.
we just had this conversation about tryouts, and most people are vanilla, right? Um,
Yeah.
but what do you look for when you're looking at the mental side of it? And I'm not talking about the hockey smarts here
Yeah,
from X's
yeah,
and
yeah. Well, so when you get to any level, there's a minimum level of skill that's required, right? You got to skate so fast, you got to shoot the puck so hard. There's just that minimum level. Once you get past that minimum level, the things that differentiate people are mindset, attitude, and character, right? And when you're a coach and you're observing tryouts, it starts with when somebody walks into the rink, you observe, you know, how do they carry themselves? How are they walking? Who are they talking to? What did they dress like? All the little things that would be consistent with, like you say, how important is this to somebody? And do they have the right mindset? You're looking at little indicators. When you're on the ice and you make a mistake, how do you react to that mistake? Do your shoulders slouch? Does your head come down? Or do you lift back up and compete even harder, right? Because you're rebounding from that. Um,
and
your interaction with your teammates on the ice. Do you slam your stick? Do you, are there's certain indicators where you look at somebody and you say, they have the body language, the mentality, and the mindset to be able to play for us.
and how negative, and I'm sure that there's some, like I've been in evaluations where somebody says, oh, mismatch socks, he's out. It's just details that,
Yeah,
man, I don't like his tape job or something. But then there's certain things that are universal. But so you mentioned some and that are universal things, but on the other hand, everybody does it. So how big of a deal is it so these kids are coming out here, they need to be aware of these things, right?
yeah,
That if you don't, I mean, it could be like, so let me use one. You see a kid and they have their phone in their hand, right?
yeah,
Some people that's a big deal. They don't want to see a phone out. Some people may not be as big of a deal on
yeah.
that. Some people wear their hat backwards, right?
Well, so this goes to finding a team with a culture that also fits your culture, right? Now I have opinions on what I think a winning culture is, right? And what a winning organization is. And certain organizations have standards that you could kind of carry across the board. You say, well, that's a winning attitude, that's a winning culture, that's all these things. Because I think when you're at the age between 17 and 20, from a developmental standpoint and a learning standpoint, at 17, if you end up in the wrong situation, it could be catastrophic, right? You can lose confidence. You can lose that passion, that desire to play, and that's what really drives your success. So you really got to find that fit, and then be aware of what that is, and what the expectations are, right? And this comes back down to the first thing you have to do, in order to fit anywhere, is be self-aware, and then also seek information to understand, right? And like, again, a lot of people, I see a lot of times at a camp, when you have your pre-camp meeting, right? So a lot of coaches will bring in the team. They'll talk about, okay, hey, camp is going to start this afternoon or tomorrow. Uh, uh, here's what our organization is all about. And they give the organizational values, and they start talking about what type of player that they're looking for, right? And you can immediately pick out, here's the 20 kids that are bang on, they're laser focused, they're looking me in the eyes, and they're seeking information, and they want to understand so that they can do what is necessary to make the team. And then in that meeting, like, I don't normally think phones are a big issue, but if you're in a meeting and the person's talking, you're checking your phone or you're distracted, that's an indicator that you might have focus problems or attention problems that are things that I might want on my team.
Yeah.
And again, it's an awareness thing and it's an understanding thing. So if it's important to you, seek information. And then, again, routines and habits are important because they build confidence, right? But in order to build those routines and habits that are consistent with what you're trying to do, you have to have information. So if the coach says you got to be at the rink an hour before, don't show up 59 minutes, right? Be an hour and 5 minutes. If the coach says no phones, don't bring your phone in the building. You got to make choices that are consistent with what your goals are. And if you say My goal is to play hockey on this team, and I want to make the team understand and listen to what it is that you need to do to be able to be on that team, and then take actions that are consistent with that goal, right? And that's understand the information. If the coach says or the organization says this is what we're about, then you need to be about that.
Yeah. Let me go into a different segment that I think will be helpful to some, because I think it's a common trait. You have some that, and it may be a sign of kind of maybe a lack of focus, or lack of confidence, or that they're easily, you could talk about it from a physical standpoint. You're easily knocked off the puck, right?
Yeah,
That's a you can observe that behavior, but you can also see the player that is easily knocked off their focus.
yeah,
Um, and let me explain it in this way. A game is a long game, and it's broken down into segments, and to expect someone to have a perfect game, of course, you got Nick Lidstrom, who had many perfect games from an outsider's
yeah,
perspective, right?
yeah,
But I mean, very few players will have a fault-free or a mistake-free game.
yes,
But there's some that takes, and they may go out and make the first shift, and they throw a pizza up the middle, and then that sets the tone, and they just go,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and they're fair weather sailors, that as long as you're winning, and then everything's good. But the first moment of adversity, they tend to
yeah.
choke, or they meant. So, how do you make an impact for that player that has a hard time, or is it they often get in the, you see their shoulders droop, you see they show the
Yeah,
disappointment, all these kind of behaviors that are very
yeah.
common. And
Y-
how much can you impact I heard someone was talking about, like, when we were talking about the easy button or the reset button, or it's actually physically uh, getting into a mental imagery, a mental mindset of, okay, that was not a good shift, or we just got scored on. I made a mistake. I just got rounded, and I missed the
Yeah.
poke, or I pinched wrong, or whatever, right? How do you get in a habit of or can you train that mental reset um, uh, process, from a process standpoint?
So 100% you can, right? And if you think about it, right? So just going back to some of the things you mentioned, in the NHL, the players that turn the puck over the most are generally in the top 20 in scoring. So they make more mistakes than everybody else, but they also accomplish something. So they're action oriented, and they're going to continue that. And when you want to talk about what you're just talking about, the difference between great players and good players really comes down to their consistency. I mean, you've been at games, I'm sure we've all been at games where, we see a player who's generally in the middle of the lineup, and one night he's the best player on the ice. And what you don't normally see though is a player who's the best player on the team drop from best to middle or bottom, right? He's generally always in that top five. So the difference between those players is consistency. And what establishes consistency from shift to shift, from game to game, is mindset, right? They don't let mistakes get to them. They remain focused, they remain committed, they remain determined, they remain targeted on what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And the player who has those ebbs and flows, like, hey, I have a great game and or a great shift, and then I follow it up with one that's not so great, and it takes me a little bit of time to recover, and I get back up here, is somebody who struggles with again, that self-doubt, that confidence, that focus. And there's little exercises and techniques that the best players use, and some of them don't know that they use it. They kind of naturally developed it when they were younger, and others need to be taught it. And you can teach mindset, right? So again, you have an event, you have a response. I turn the puck over, I make a mistake, the guy goes down and scores. I can either shrug my shoulders and be let down. Now I'm going to play back off hockey, which means, hey, I'm not going to make the mistake. So I'm going to back off and play conservative. So I'm not really involved in the play. I'm not really making anything happen. And at some point you become not noticeable anymore because not only are you not making mistakes, but you're also not doing anything productive, right? And you kind of tend to weigh off. So it all becomes what our response is, and we control our response, right? So you kind of teach somebody little techniques, right? So, okay, you've made a mistake. Okay, that's great. What did you learn from that mistake? And what's the learning? What is the thing you're going to learn out of that, right? And then stay in the present. So if I stay in the present and I stay focused, okay, I've learned this. I've made the mistake. I learned it. Now I'm here. I'm focused on my next shift. What I'm going to do my next shift and what I'm going to do. And you already have decided, here's what I need to do this game. So now you got to get back to that. So you have a plan, and then you always got to get back to that plan, right? And I'm going to skate hard. I'm going to win one-on-one battles. I'm going to do, here's the things I'm going to do to be successful. And then you've always got to get back. Every shift, you're starting over. You could have a great shift, score a goal, but the only shift that matters now is the next one,
Yeah.
right? And you have to develop that mentality, because you have to live in the present. And the more you live in the present, the more consistent you're going to be and the better you're going to be. And there's breathing exercises, there's visualization, there's other things that help you kind of recover from those things. Part of the problem is great players have a natural tendency, or been guided to handle stress and anxiety and some of the other things a little bit better. Other players, it affects the way that they respond and their action, right? So you try and teach them, okay, hey, when that happens, take a deep breath, reset, and you give them some form of resetting,
Yeah.
which is, hey, I'm gonna give myself some a power statement, like I can do this, or something that is the start of your reset, and then you move into, oh, now you visualize success. What could I have done differently? And now you visualize that same situation happening again, but you visualize a different outcome. And why is it a different outcome? Because you've learned from it and you've created a new result. And doing those things allows you to remain confident and continue to be a person of action rather than avoidance, right? And I always go into, you don't want to be a player of avoidance. I could go through the whole camp and not make a mistake, but if I don't do anything on the action side, I'm not making the team.
Yeah. Let's move into this area, which is kind of the perfect segue of kind of like this aspect of you mentioned before how hard it is to do that on your own, or
Yes,
how hard it is to um, the people that they seek themselves for the affirmation, or for they
yes,
could actually be part of the problem and not actually helping you,
they
right?
can be.
And it can
Yes,
be, I mean, how many times do we hear this in the car ride home as a youth hockey player, and that's what kills a player, is the car ride home, because of instead of it being psychologically enhancing, it's psychologically detrimental. Um,
yes,
so the need for, and because you're providing this as a profession, um,
yes.
you kind of said, yeah, I kind of retired, so now I do this full time, right? But you
Yeah,
also said, this is your passion, but you're a proponent of having an outside person that is good at this. So if you want to get really really good at improving your body, find the best strength and conditioning coach that can coach you and guide
yes,
you in building your body. So, you're a proponent for having an outside person for this, and that's what you and your company, with
yes.
Champion Mindset Academy does. What is your so for people that are, I would imagine that there's a lot of players, coaches, parents that are seeing this, that man, this would be really good for my son or my daughter
Yeah,
to utilize someone. And you mentioned kind of for the team aspect, and I would imagine it's the same thing, finding the right fit, someone that you align with, someone that you have a
100%.
relationship and trust. What do you So when people contact you, and we'll end with that at the end of how do you contact you, but when they contact you, what do you walk us through when, let's say, I am now contacting you and we're role playing, and I'm saying, hey, I heard you on the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. I
Yeah,
like what I heard. I'm wondering about my son. He's 17. He's playing U18 AAA, US, Canada. I really think this would be good for him, or the player that reaches out to you?
Yeah.
What's your advice?
Well, so the very first thing is you have to find somebody that fits with you, right? So, has the same personality, shares the same values, and and has what it is that you're seeking or think you're seeking for, right? And because this really becomes all about a relationship, right? So, not every individual needs the same kind of coaching or mentoring when it comes to mindset. And as a mindset coach, you have to be able to adapt to that individual. But the most important thing between a mindset coach and a player is trust, right? So you have to be able to trust the fact that person that you're working with, one, has your best interest at heart, and two, is able to be honest with you in a constructive way that you're able to take that information, absorb that information, and then apply it, right? Because you want to be able to feel like, hey, I can be open and honest, because there's a lot of reasons why people end up with self-doubt, or they struggle with focus, and it's not all the same, right? Like, it might have been an experience that you had from a long time ago. It might have been a current coach. It might be, things that have been said. There's a lot of different reasons why things happen, and the advice has to adapt to that individual. Now, the techniques and tools that you use are going to be similar, right? With visualization, breathing, affirmations, gratitude. There's different things that you put in place along the way, that help somebody along the way. Goal setting is essential, right? When you talk about goal setting, clear defined goals, but you also want to make them achievable so that somebody who lacks confidence can turn around and achieve success. So that the next time you come in and say, hey, we set that goal last time, were you able to do it? Yes. And that gives them, that little bit of, yes, I did it. And I feel good about myself, right? And that's the start of, kind of building that self-belief. But, I think the most important thing is to understand that, when I grew up, and I don't know about you, but when I grew up, mental toughness was something that people said, you either have it or you don't have it, right? Oh, that guy's tough. That guy's mentally tough. He's resilient. He's strong. Hey, this kid isn't. They'll never be, right? And they throw that kid to the side, where this is something that can be taught. This is something that you can learn how to do. And this is something that it's, how do you talk to yourself? Do you talk to yourself in a positive way, or do you get mad at yourself when you make a mistake? Right? And there's nothing wrong with being, boy, I shouldn't have done that. Boy, I'm mad that I made that mistake. But how do you recover? Hey, I'm good enough. I'm good enough not to make that mistake. I can accomplish this, right? Or, geez, I'm not even going to try that again because I'm no good at it, right? There's two different approaches that people have in their head, right? And one's fear driven and the other's confidence driven. But you can coach that. You can coach how you talk to yourself. You can coach how you relax your body and mind, right? And I do think that it's important to realize that it is something that can be taught. It is something that can be cultivated. It is something that you can develop, and it is something that can be impactful in your life, right? Just forget the hockey side of it, just from a fulfillment and satisfaction side. Having a different mindset can be very impactful on how you approach things, right? Are things learning opportunities, or are they or are they things that crush your spirit, right? And somebody who ends up succeeding is somebody who takes failures and setbacks and challenges as learning opportunities, and somebody who struggles sees them as failures and things that they don't want to attempt again because they're afraid of failing a second time.
Yeah. How,
um but
how
but you can teach somebody all this.
how long does it typically take? So the normal engagement, it's going to take a
Yeah.
while to kind of build trust, but you don't have a huge runway to work with.
Yeah.
And and I'm sure that you work with some that goes faster into, and they have success right away. But
Yeah.
what are some common or typical things that you see when you start working with a new player?
Well, so one is the first thing you start to notice right away is change in body language and demeanor, right? In conversations, right? One of the things a lot of players who come in and seek mindset coaching is that they have a hard time complimenting themselves or recognizing the things that they do good. They seem to focus a lot on the things that aren't going well, right? And that's the quickest thing that you can start to change, the way somebody talks to themselves. Now, any habit takes 21, any habit generally takes 21 days to a month to start making it a routine, right? So it usually takes 21 to 28 days before you start to see the impact. But you can see in a couple of visits, you can see small signs that, hey, you're having an impact and the body language is changing, right? Um, and you know, the one thing is, and you know, and you go to professional athletes, Tim Grover with Michael Jordan, Greg Harden with Tom Brady. These are lifetime people. These weren't people that sat around and had a casual conversation with Tom Brady over a period of a few weeks. Tom Brady had his mindset coached from his senior year, junior year at Michigan, all the way through his last year of pro football, right? Um, and he said he was the most impactful person that he had in his life. Um, and that's just a matter of, you know, how we approach things. So when someone comes to you, learning and continuing that mindset, it's a never ending process, right? It's something that you could do daily, and it's a commitment that you have to make. And when you start to make commitments like that, it's always nice to have a partner, right? So like
Yeah.
when you go to the gym, it's a lot easier to say, hey, Paul and I go to the gym every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and now you're committed to doing that with Paul, right? If you're on your own, sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm gonna skip this today, right? And when you're on a mindset journey, affirmations, positive talk, self-belief, all these things are important. And when you're doing it on your own, it's easy to get lazy and get away from it. When you have a mentor or people that are guiding you, you know, it moves the process along to the point where it just becomes a part of your life.
Yeah, and I think that is what we talked about earlier, optimization, right? And having a
Yeah.
partner increases the likelihood that you're going to have optimization in growth in that area. Just like having
Yes.
having a skills coach, it's hard to work on skills on your own. It's hard to work on
Yes.
strength and conditioning on your own. The likelihood you're going to have success in strength and conditioning is when you're working with a good strength coach.
Yes.
Um, because you're not always going to have days that you wake up and are good. Let's wrap this up in kind of what's the best way to reach you. You have the Champion Mindset Academy training. Um, what is the URL for your website?
So the website's the championmindsetacademy.com.
.com.
That's
Yeah.
the website. So it's the championmindsetacademy.com. And then my email is, which is a great way to get a hold of me too, and I do respond to emails relatively quickly, is gdupont at the championmindsetacademy.com.
Yep.
And you know, emails are usually about a day response, and you know, there are other forms and other information on the website. We're still upgrading our website, adding some different things. And we do have, you know, some tools available for people, and obviously some courses and some other things that we put out there. You know, for people that maybe feel like, hey, I'm a do it myself kind of person. I'm going to try this on my own. I do believe that the the support network that you surround yourself with is very important when you're trying to accomplish stuff like this. Um, you know, when you say, hey, if I want to reach 100% of my potential, uh, you know, it's easier to do it with a skills coach than it is to do it on your own. And
Yep.
it's the same thing with mindset development.
Yep. And I think that that's when you go to the website, there is here's the things that we work on, and there's also a self-assessment. I think is a good one to kind of go through, right?
Yeah, so you email for the self-assessment, we'll send you a self-assessment, which helps build awareness. It's a small assessment that we can give you. We get a little bit deeper if you become a client, but the initial one that's free is a 25 question self-assessment, and you answer questions on a scale, and it gives you, here's your current mindset, right? And with that current mindset, it tells you a little bit about where you're at and what you need to do.
Yeah. So here's kind of what I'm hoping that we can, we did a 3-part series.
Yeah.
We had Mike Hartman from Stanley Cup champion on. We had Shawnee Harley on, who's from British Columbia, and then we've had George Dupont on. 3 very very different people, but are all loving the game sport, and hopefully we get talked about the same subject with different flavor. And what I want from here is to create a dialogue. I want to increase the focus on the mental side of this, especially this time of year. And we'll post this episode, and hopefully it will generate some conversation in the different, seem like the most traction that we have is on LinkedIn, but it's a great forum for this discussion to be able to
Yeah.
say, do you have a coach, or are you doing it your own? Are you are your role as a player, or your role as a parent, or are you a coach perhaps, and you have players that are in this? What are some methods, and then we can share, and from that we can help some people in this area of
Yeah.
mindset. And I so appreciate you coming on. Two more things. You're a little bit away from this, but we always ask the guest. You met yourself at 17, and things you know now that you didn't know back then when you were 17. What would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself at 17?
Well, at 17, I was very passionate and focused about hockey, but I also was distracted by outside things at times.
Oh no,
Um,
no one else is
well,
that.
like most 17-year-olds, right? Girls and other things, right? So, I think that you provide a little bit of idea about focus on what's important, because that's the thing that's going to have the most meaningful and long-lasting impact on yourself. Um, and so stay consistent. I always talk about making your actions consistent with your goals, and that would be one. Again, you look at kind of my path, and self-awareness is one thing, that you really need an understanding, and that helps eliminate what ifs, right? Your self-awareness, your values, and staying true to them. That would be my guidance. Now, I probably got to where I am because of some of the experiences that I had, and everything else. But I do think that hey, understanding that maybe reduce the learning curve a little bit would have prepared me for a few other things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, last thing, so we have a partnership with TargetAid.com. TargetAid is they're a crowdsourcing fundraising platform in Sweden. They're expanding now. I think they're going into Norway next, but been a good partner and kind of helping us with this kind of initiative of the team of my heart, team in my heart. And always interesting with international people. But when I say the team that is in your heart or closest to your heart, which one would you which answer would come from George Dupont?
Well, the team that's in my heart is always family and friends. That's where I always start, and then I move from there. You know, and then I kind of move outside, the circle of influence, and everything else. But if we're just talking strict teams,
Yeah, let's put the
um,
put the jersey. Which logo is it?
put the jersey.
You
I
know what?
grew up this is controversial because of all the French separation in Canada and everything, but I grew up a diehard Montreal Canadiens fan. Um, and now, again, I think I started this on the show and said, hey, I've become just a Canada fan because it's 30 years or so since Canada's won a Stanley Cup, and by golly, I'd like to see a Canadian team, hoist the cup. So right now I'm cheering for Edmonton, but if I had my choice, it would still be the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final.
All right, that's good. We're going to put it. We have a presence on Target Aid, and under the Junior Hockey Podcast, Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast, we'll have a little segment for each guest, and it'll say,
Okay.
George Dupont from Champion Mindset Academy. His team of his heart is Montreal Canadiens, and it'll be a little fun thing. But what we're really trying to do with that, just so people understand why are we doing it, it's really so if we've had a lot of them that are saying, hey, it's my youth hockey team, and especially if you're in Sweden, it provides some great content for that club to highlight in their social media. We get a little bit of a side attention because it's coming
Yeah.
from this, and they may never have heard of Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast, and hopefully people go in and visit. But it's really highlighting the story of, I belong to this club. This is who I have on the wall. my
Yeah.
jersey on the wall, and I want you guys to know that that is my favorite club. That's kind of the initiative we have.
Yeah.
Just a good
Well,
one.
hey, it's a hand-me-down because my son's now a Montreal Canadiens
Oh,
fan, and a few years ago for Christmas, got him an autographed Carey Price jersey. And that was the year that they actually ended up in the Stanley Cup Finals. It was a big year for Montreal fans, but we're kind of on the rebound right now. But the future looks promising.
well, they will always be a original six and crazy people up there in French Canada and so on. Thanks a bunch
Yes.
for coming on and being a good sport and talking about this fun subject of mindset and we'll see where it goes. Let's get
Yeah.
some awareness going.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. So.
Yeah, thanks.